My dad works in B2B marketing. He came by my school for career day and said he was a big ROAS man. Then he told everyone how much he loved calculating his return on ad spend. My friends still laugh at me to this day.
Not everyone gets B2B, but with LinkedIn, you'll be able to reach people who do. Get a $100 credit on your next ad campaign. Go to linkedin.com/results to claim your credit. That's linkedin.com/results. Terms and conditions apply. LinkedIn, the place to be, to be.
You're in a good place now. You are listening to Perspectives with Ashley Burgess.
Welcome back live to Live Your True Life Perspectives, and I'm your host, Ashley Burgess. On today's show, we're going to be talking about challenging, even negative people, those folks that we might find even demanding, and how those people impact our day-to-day life, whether we're at work or in our personal life, how that impacts us, and what happens when we're around these people for an extended period of time. You know, I find that many of us are not aware of how many of those people exist in our life. Many of us aren't aware of how many of those people we have as quote-unquote friends. Some of us don't realize how many of those people are surrounding us in the workplace, right? Or even in our neighborhood or where we live. And it's interesting because I find that we have a lot of great relationships and we feel really good about things. We have a lot of good things coming from our work, from our career. We have a lot of good things coming from our friends. But it seems like there's certain people that tend to just weigh us down. There's certain specific people that are extremely demanding, and they demand more of your time than really anybody else that you interact with. And in the beginning, it might not be that apparent. You might not see it totally, oh my gosh, this person's taking all my time. But over time, it seems that just interacting with them is about the same interaction as it is with 3 or 4 people, where it seems that you're taking a lot of your time trying to explain or express things to this person. And it seems that there's some friction or tension in the fact that it also feels like this person is not ever going to be happy with what you do. And so in today's show, I want to make us aware of some of the red flags, some of the indications, really, that we're dealing with somebody who may be a very challenging, demanding person in your life, right? Because the more we're able to see these people for who they truly are, the better off we are, because we can begin to get some distance. We can begin to spend less time with them. We can realize and recognize what's happening very quickly and easily. And in those processes, we begin to realize how that impacts us, right? And one of the things we can do, which is so great, is we can begin to give them less of our time with intent. We can begin to prioritize other things in its place. And if we're unable to do that because it's somebody that represents perhaps somebody that's higher in the food chain at work, or perhaps a family member, we can talk about that later in the hour and how we can work on that where this person doesn't impact our lives in the same way, not making us feel icky or negative or beat down after speaking with them. And so it's very important to be able to have not only the information and knowledge as to who these people are, but how we safeguard ourselves when dealing with their energy. One of the indications that I realize that I'm dealing with a challenging, demanding person is that they tend to, in my interactions with them, it feels as though my stress level is increased. And I don't know about you, but I'm very aware of those types of things and changes. And when my stress level feels increased, I try to monitor and figure out, where is the stress coming from? Why am I feeling stressed? Why is this feeling happening? Why do I feel this way? And it can be very awakening to understand, first off, who is it that you feel calm around, right? Think about it. It's something we rarely do. I know it sounds very simple, but it's something that we rarely do. Who are the people that you spend time with or have to spend time with? Who in your interactions at work or at home or family or neighborhood or friendships or activities that you're doing? Who are the people that, wow, you enjoy spending time with them? It's just easy. It's simple. There's not a stress or anxiety. It just seems to be, just kind of calming and relaxing. Who are those people? And really look at that, because a lot of us don't realize, okay, there's some people that I'm around that I really just appreciate being around. There's some people I'm around that, it's not hard. you're not walking uphill. You're not having to explain yourself a million times. You're not having to find a solution all the time. And it can be very joy-filled, right? It can be really good friendships, relationships, interactions at work that you actually like interacting with and see it and happy to actually have that interaction. So think about it. Who are the folks that you're calm around, that you feel good around, or if even feel elated or feel happy? And then who are those folks that when you're around, it seems like it's very stressful? Perhaps you feel like you're pulling teeth. Perhaps it seems like nothing is really ever explained or understood. Perhaps it's back on you most of the time with these conversations, is you figuring out the solution, you figuring out how to take care of it. What about the folks that it seems like everything's always a problem? There's a problem all the time, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And some of those relationships can be just downright challenging, right? Because I don't feel like we're supposed to be living our life as every single thing is a problem. And there are those people that exist out there that they want to talk about the problem. They want to talk about the problem all the time. Many of those people fail to want to discuss solution, right? Because if there's a solution, there's no more problem. If there's a solution, there's no more time to bitch, right? So what do you do at that point? And I think some people are wired that what they want to do is find problems, bitch about the situation, and continue to do that without really wanting solution. Because if there was a solution, what would happen? They would have to find something else to be disgruntled about, which I don't think they're going to have a challenge doing. However, it's those types of personalities that we have to be aware, because I think if you have a lot of those types of personalities around you, the stress and anxiety level that you experience on a day-to-day basis goes up 100%, right? Because if you're dealing with those types of people day in and day out, we have to sit there and say, okay, do I have to deal with these people? Do I have to interact with these people? If I do have to interact with them, what is the level of interaction that I have to interact with them, right? What's the level? How long do I have to interact, right? Seriously, think about it. Because, if you don't have to interact with them that much, why are we constantly engaging? Because there's a lot of thoughts to that. The engagement, especially with challenging, demanding people, is that I think sometimes we engage with these people even when we don't have to because of our upbringing. Because we've been around challenging, demanding people as children, and it was challenging, but we did it, right? Because we had to do it. Perhaps it's a mother or father, family member. Maybe it was a sibling. And so we're used to it. So that when other people come our way that have that same type of personality structure, we sit there and we give in and we try to take care of it, or we try to find solution, or we try to be their friend, even though we really don't need to be having a lot to do with their situation or circumstances, because all we're doing is bringing stress into our life that we don't necessarily need to have. And I find it interesting, too. I've had to check that in my own life, where I found myself giving the benefit of the doubt to people who are very challenging, very demanding, very negative. And I start kind of deconstructing the relationship, and I see how it is, and I see how the relationship is. And some parts of it's not every relationship is all bad, right? The extreme black and white thinking is not constructive. But some of these relationships, the negative does outweigh the positive. And we have to analyze that and see it. And I'm not saying, hey, analyze all your relationships, get rid of these people in your life, move on. I mean, some of you may choose to. And if you have the ability to do so, so be it. Some of you may say, hey, Ashley, some of these people in my life, I can't. I work, I have a career, I work at the office, I'm having to deal with these from some higher ups, or even some subordinates that I am unable to let go of, and I have to deal with that. Well, in that case, I understand, but we'll talk about safeguarding yourself later. However, some of us do have some of these superfluous people around that we can make that emotional distance, right? We can start putting emotional distance between us and them and not really giving in and understanding if we are giving into them and catering to them, why are we catering to them, right? Why do we cater to them? And I always think that's interesting because a lot of times, I do feel like that's from childhood. We cater to them based on what we're used to. And so I just want you to look at that. That's a nugget to take from this show today, because a lot of times we have difficult people around us because we've been around difficult people in our life. Perhaps your father was a very difficult person, maybe very self-centered, maybe very narcissistic, maybe very demanding, center of attention, very challenging. And then you're like a moth to a flame to someone that's very similar to that, and they come in the form of a friend, okay? And there you are, and it seems like it feels very similar, right? It almost feels very similar, and it almost feels like you're getting some crumbs in this relationships, and a lot of times in these relationships, we see the crumbs as being this big thing, right? Because, quite honestly, there's a lot not coming out of the relationship, right? And I find that to be a very interesting situation. I find it to be very eye-opening when we allow it to be. So the difference between the folks that you feel stressed with and the folks that you feel calm around, or that you feel energized around, or that you feel elated, or that you feel just anything but stress and anxiety or negativity. The next thing that I want you to think about is a lot of these challenging people that we find in our circle of friends, or we find in our work environment, or we find in the area that we live in. A lot of these folks also want to find faults in whatever's happening in the world, where you're living, at work, whatever it is. Maybe you take your kids to school and there's some parents that you interact with, and some of these people are just really great people, and some of them it seems like they're never happy. The school's not good enough. The teachers aren't good enough. There's always a problem. What are we going to do? And I understand problems are problems, and we can't say everything's great and act like it doesn't exist. It's not like I'm talking about, let's just fade all the issues out of the way. It's all rainbows and unicorns. We're all going to be happy and running around singing together, kumbaya. I'm not suggesting that, but what I am suggesting is that one of the biggest indications that I found is that when people want to argue, they want to fight about things, they want to bitch about things, they want to pontificate about things to exhaustion, and they don't really want to find a solution. So there's people out there that do want to find solutions. There's people out there that do care about finding solution, right? And I find that to be very interesting, very eye-opening, because when we do want to find solution, I think it changes the conversation to a different level, right? Because if I'm just focusing on the fact that we don't have any solution, we have no solution, I'm not going to focus on any solution. If we're focusing just on that, and I want to focus that way, and I want to talk about all the problems, but I don't want to find any solution, I'm kind of operating at a lower vibrational output, right? I just am. Because I'm coming from a place of anger, fear, resentment, that sort of thing, right? But when I actually want to find solution and I'm working toward that, and I'm like very gainfully happy to find that solution, what do I do next? How do I find that? How do I go from point A to point B? And when we're dealing with folks like that, it's so powerful because they want to find solution too. They want to find solution too. And when we're around people that want to find solution too, it changes the conversation. It changes the vibrational level of the conversation. It changes the direction of the conversation. And that's some stuff that I can get behind. So when I return, we're going to be talking more about being able to spot these challenging, negative, demanding people. And then later on in the podcast, we're going to be talking about how we safeguard ourselves when dealing with these folks and safeguarding our energy, our time, and just our well-being when interacting with them. Stay tuned. Live Your True Life Perspectives with your host, me, Ashley Burgess, will be back in. I'll be back this time. Yeah, I'll be back this time in 2 shakes.
Turn it up and jump in the deep end on Perspectives. Now, here's Ashley.
Welcome back live to Live Your True Life Perspectives, and I'm your host, Ashley Burgess. On today's show, I've been talking about challenging, negative, and demanding people who can impact our life in many ways. And we really need to be able to spot these folks and understand who we're dealing with so that we really, use our time wisely. And a lot of times with folks who are challenging and demanding, there's a lot of energy behind that. There can be a lot of negativity. There can be a lot of overwhelming feelings. There can be a lot of things that we don't necessarily want to have a bunch of in our life, right? So we really need to be able to analyze that and see each relationship clearly, right? So that we understand who we're spending time with, who we're not spending time with, who do we need to be spending time with, who do we need to put some distance in between, and why do we need to put that distance? And right before the break, I was talking about how a couple of ways that you could spot these people, because it's very important. Remember, we want to be able to spot them and understand who we're dealing with. Like, for example, who do we spend time with that adds stress to our life, right? And then who do we spend time with that seems to create joy or calmness in our life, or just, it just feels good, or it seems reciprocal, or it seems like there's a good banter, there's great communication. Another thing that I brought up is the fact that there's some folks out there that want to argue, they want to fight, they want to bitch because they don't really want to find solution. They like the idea of not having solutions so that they can have an issue, right? And so if you come up with solution to their issues, a lot of times they don't want to hear it. And I'm not saying that we want to act like there is no problems, because there are issues in our world, right? There are issues in our world. There are issues in our work environment. There are issues probably with friends and family that we have. There's issues with organizations that you belong to. There are issues in probably some of the folks that you live near. So there's things that, probably have to be taken care of, but are there solutions that can be discussed? And one of the biggest indications with some of these negative demanding, folks that have, they're kind of challenging, one of the big things usually that you find is that they just don't really want to talk about solution. They just don't. It's not part of it. They want to talk about the problems, but they don't want to find solution. And, so that's a big indication. Another indication that I found, and this might sound harsh, and I don't want it to sound harsh. It might sound harsh, and if it sounds harsh, look at it from a couple of different angles before you judge it. The biggest thing is that a lot of these folks do not add value. Okay, let me explain that again. They don't add value. They're not adding value to your life. They're causing more chaos, more problems, more issue than they add value. Okay, and I want you to really think about that. Do you have some folks in your life that it's more stress and anxiety than good dealing with them? Do you have folks in your life that it feels like, when you're around them, it just feels stressful and it doesn't feel like there's a lot of purpose behind it? Because one of the things that I've realized is that a lot of times we give people the benefit of the doubt for one reason or another. And I really want you to dig deep into that today and really think about it. Because I feel that when we think about value and what gives us value, I'm not saying somebody has to do something for you all the time. It's not really about that, but it's about reciprocation. And I think if you start looking at some of these folks in your life, you can see that you might be doing things. Not that it matters. It's not a scoreboard. I'm not like, oh, you did things 3 times for this person and they didn't do anything for you. It's not like that. But there's a lot of folks out there that you probably give carte blanche to because they're old friends. They've been around in high school with you. Maybe you've known them for 20 years. Maybe you feel sorry for them, or you feel like they've had a challenging time, or maybe you give them, whatever, because of their age or because of whatever, and you feel that way. But it seems, though, when you start looking at the relationship, when you start looking at it honestly, really think about that. Because, when I started looking at my relationships a while back and I started thinking about it, and, I began just looking at each relationship specifically, and I started thinking about, the concept of reciprocation, giving and taking and being there for each other. That was one of the things that I looked at. And when I wasn't really getting that back, that was a really interesting indication. Not that I was keeping score, but I feel like that's an indication that it's not really reciprocated. That's an indication that the person may, that might be how they are in all relationships. And you kind of got to look at that. One of the biggest indications I find is that, when someone's constantly saying that they want to do something with you, but they constantly drop the ball, it never happens. And that's fine, because it might be that you don't really need to be spending time with this person at all. And that might be an indication there. When somebody says that they're going to take care of something or do something for you and it's not ever getting done. Right. And you have to kind of hammer it in a couple of times and they keep saying they're going to do it and they don't. When somebody is kind of rarely there, they're there to bitch or to find fault with, but when it comes to something else, they're not there. Some folks want to find the negative in the situation. And if you're not wanting to look for that negative, you might not be part of their group, right? And that's okay. I'm not trying to be in everybody's group. I have some really great friends and I have some really great acquaintances and I have some really great people that I work with. that's fine. I'm okay with that, but we need to kind of look at it where do we really like to be? Who do we like to really be around? Do they like to be around us? Are we reciprocal? Are we helping them? Are we doing things as well? And, we got to look at it from every angle, right? Because sometimes we look at it from just one angle or another. Well, we really need to be looking at it from the angle of, okay, who am I in my friendships and relationships? And who am I dealing with in these friendships and relationships? And do I feel, more so than not, that the majority of my relationships and majority of the people that I communicate with are pretty positive? And I'm not talking about toxic positivity here, okay, guys? Because I know that there's a difference between positivity and toxic positivity. And we've talked about that in a previous show on the podcast. We'll definitely want to put the link here in the description for sure as you're watching this, because you can catch up with that show. So I'm not talking about toxic positivity. I'm just talking about positivity, because there's times where we can't always be positive about everything. Not everything is great. But sometimes I think there's a neutrality there, right? There's a neutrality there. I don't have to be happy, joy about something that's going wrong, but I don't have to be like the depths of hell. We don't have to go there. We can kind of sit there and have some neutrality. And I think sometimes when we come from a state of neutrality, it's more able for us to find solution than otherwise. And because I think it depends on kind of where we're coming from, the anger, the stress, the resentment, that sort of thing. And it can be really challenging to find solution when we're dealing with those types of feelings. Another indication of dealing with somebody that might be challenging, demanding, or negative. And this one is very interesting because I find that it's true all the time. I mean, like, it's true. Okay, this is a steadfast truth here. Is that they really don't necessarily care about you, right? Or your needs, or show concern for your concerns. However, these people will show concern when it impacts them. Okay, so we really need to look at it, because a lot of times these folks, if it impacts them, they're around you, they're near you, they're your friend, right? Oh, hey, let's band together when it comes to this. But if it's anything outside of that, right? If it's anything outside of that situation, what do we have? Right? And so, and a lot of times we have to look at it, because it's one thing when you're banding together over a general concern, and that's great, right? It's great. But there also has to be some respect given with even issues that you might bring up, maybe things that you talk about, because a lot of times you'll find that there's like this joint concern, but outside of that joint concern, that's it. And so, and if that's the case, because there is reason and there's good times to have a joint concern and not really be joined for other things, I can understand that. But in that situation, we have to look at the joint concern. We have to see that value, interact with them based on that joint concern, and then realize that there's a limitation probably to that relationship. Right? Because we've all had that limited concern relationship where, okay, like, for example, everybody's concerned. Like, let's say everybody on your street is concerned about the value of their property, and everybody gets together and discusses what they want to do. But outside of this, your neighbors don't want to be friends with you, really. Your neighbors haven't really reached out to you. You don't talk about your kids' schooling together. You don't talk about other things. It doesn't get anywhere else. So it's like, I mean, you can try to pursue those relationships if you feel that one of those relationships might be very good or advantageous as far as the connection, or maybe you see more to that relationship. But for the most part, we have to realize that the limited engagement might just be that, and not try to turn it into anything. And what I've seen, though, when people come up with a common goal, that's great. But sometimes that connection with that person can take over a lot of your life, and it might not be very proactive for you. It's helpful in that situation for everybody concerned, but we need to see where those limitations and logistics really end. When I return, I'll be talking more about some of these red flags, some of these indications, because this is really important, right? We need to know who we're spending time with, and we need to analyze that correctly. And then how do we safeguard ourselves? Because that's so important. How do we do it? Especially when it comes to people that are maybe closer to us, people that we've known for a long time, people that we've allowed to be this way for a long time. I mean, you probably have some people that you know that they've been this way the whole time, and you've placated them and you've allowed them to be that way, but it's now getting to a stress point that you can no longer, or do no longer want to, you don't want to deal with it anymore. And that's very understandable, because I think when things get to a certain crescendo, a certain level, we got to make some changes, right? Because if it's not working, it's just not working. Stay tuned. Live your true life perspectives with your host, me, Ashley Burgess, will be back in. I'll be back this time in 2 shakes.
This is Jake Busey, and you're listening to Perspectives with Ashley Burgess.
Welcome back live to Live Your True Life Perspectives, and I'm your host, Ashley Burgess. On today's show, we've been talking about dealing with demanding, challenging, even negative people, how to spot them, right? How to spot them is a big thing, because a lot of times we don't really realize it unless somebody's really over the top, right? Sometimes. And then sometimes we give people carte blanche, and then sometimes we've been around these personalities our whole life, and we really don't see the impact it has on us, right? We really just don't see it. We don't realize the negative impact. We don't realize the stress and anxiety. We don't know, we don't realize, we maybe not want to see it. And so I'm just trying to point out these indications. Some of us call them these red flags, so we know better what we're dealing with. And right before the break, I was talking about how it's pretty much true 99.9% of the time, right? Is that a lot of these folks don't really care about you. They don't care about your needs. They're not going to show concern unless it benefits them to some degree about things that impact you, unless what impacts you impacts them. Okay, and I want you to think about that. How many people are you around that really, honestly, that's it? They're only going to get behind something or help you or be there for you if it's something that impacts them. And there's a lot of folks out there, because usually there's a lot of people out there that might be very demanding and challenging. That's like, what's in it for me? What's in it for me? The whole what's in it for me mentality, right? And so you got to really watch out for these folk, the what's in it for me people, because if you don't watch out, you can get stuck in this, and next thing you know, they use you up as you help them, and they're long gone. They're long gone. Or they make your life miserable in the process. And a lot of these people, they give us more work to do. Maybe they give us more things to deal with. There's always kind of anger, confusion, and issues in there. There's some bitching and unhappiness. And I don't know about you, but I live, my life is good, but I do have stress in my life. And I do help people find solution in a lot of things during the day with my clients. And I might see 40 clients a week where we're working on that stuff. And I'm very happy to work with them and help them to overcome the issues and problems in their life. But when I get out of work and I'm meeting with someone, the last thing I want to hear is someone that they want to argue and they want to fight and they want to bitch about something, but they don't want to come up with any solution. And they're not really thinking from that perspective. And because when I work with a client, my clients are very intelligent, very smart people who understand, okay, it takes me, I have to make changes. What am I willing to change? How am I willing to do that? How do we go by doing that? Okay, now we've assimilated this change and we're working on this, and now my life is getting better and better and better. What's the next situation? How do I power up? How do I merge into this? How do I create that success that I want? How do I overcome this negativity over here? How do I deal with the manipulative family dynamic that I have? And it's great. It's about what do we do next? And I feel like that's very empowering. But when I'm dealing with people who really aren't empowered, they just want to find problem, that's when to me, it's just a waste of time, because we're not even on the same page, right? And I think that some of us get stuck in with some of these people because they might be interesting, they may be the center of attention, maybe their personality is kind of addictive, what have you, but at the same time, we have to really look back and see that. And I find that a lot of us might be around those type of people and even cater to those type of people because of our upbringing, right? Because of that upbringing. Like, really think about it. Look at your family dynamic. Look at your mother. Look at your father. And I'm not saying everything goes back to the parents. A lot of it does, though. A lot of it does, right? The way that we were raised has a lot to do with who we are, right? I mean, seriously, the way that I'm raised has a lot to do with who I am. And so with that idea, with that concept, our parents did have a lot of forming of ideas, concepts, things that we dealt with. And as a child, it's not like we could sit there and say, you know what, I've had enough of this. I'm 5 years old. I've had enough of this. I'm going to go get in my own apartment. I'm tired of this. I'm tired of listening to this. No, what happens is instead we go, We listen, we accept it, we try to make it okay, right? Because that's all we can do. We can't get our own apartment. We can't drive away from the house. They're not giving licenses to kids that are 5 or 8 years old. It's just not happening. You have to stick in there and listen to this. You have to deal with this. And even if mom is a certain way or dad's a certain way, we listen to it, we kind of deal with it, and then we kind of act like it's not a big deal, and we try to find the good part of it. Or many of you say, well, man, I don't even remember a lot of my childhood. Why is that? Well, I mean, you probably blocked a lot of it out, even if it wasn't abuse and that sort of thing. If there was a household where there was a lot of negativity and a lot of anger and a lot of yelling and a lot of no solutions and all that stuff, you might have blocked a lot of that out because, quite frankly, it wasn't very positive to be around, right? And so a lot of times we have a tendency of doing that same thing in the family dynamic that we're in now. We block it out. We act like it doesn't exist. We accept it. We go through it, right? Seriously, think about it. Some of us, we're sweeping it under the rug. We're acting like it doesn't exist because we really don't want to deal with it. Some people might say, oh, well, you're just avoidant. Well, you might be avoiding the argument because you don't really want to deal with it because you don't even know if there is going to be a solution. How do we deal with folks, especially in our own family dynamic? Maybe your husband, maybe your wife, maybe a mother-in-law, father-in-law, maybe your own mother, maybe your own father, who is adding stress and anxiety in your life because what? Because they're challenging and demanding people. And this is the hardest thing because we can sit there and say, okay, we can eliminate some of these friends that we know. We can eliminate some of these acquaintances that we know. Maybe we can avoid John or Barbara or whoever at the office space, Okay, I mean, I don't really need to interact with them that much. Maybe I just won't go to the 5th floor. Maybe I just won't walk through by their cubicle. It's great. We can do a lot of that stuff. But what about the people that you can't avoid? What do you do then? Because those are usually the people. And I mean, there's some of them that we can, when you're thinking about family's not, it's not fast and true. You got to hang out with your family all the time. Some of us are just related to these people. And if we weren't related to these people, we'd never speak to them. Because we don't have the same value structure. We don't agree with the same things. We don't see eye to eye, right? At all on anything. And so we have to analyze that too. So what do we do when we have a challenging negative person that's demanding? How do we deal with it? And how do we safeguard ourselves? Because we got to really think about that. First off, how much time do I really need to spend around this person? Right? What's the time? What's the time? What's the time that we have? I mean, what is the time? How much time? And I think that's one of the biggest questions. It's like with the phone calls. You got the family member that wants to call up and talk about all the problems. All the health issues, all the world's problems, maybe all the political issues. Oh my goodness, this is happening in our world, and oh my goodness. And I understand there's some things that concern me, when it comes to like some stuff on our planet and in the direction we're going. But it's okay to discuss some of that some of the time, right? I mean, I'm not suggesting that we never bring that up. But I mean, the whole conversation is filled with that. That can be a little overwhelming. Like, somebody starts with how much water we have on the planet or whatever else. I mean, yeah, that's something we need to think about. That's definitely very important. And it's very, very, very important. But we got to be able to have some sort of conversation that's not about doomsday, right? It's not a doomsday conversation. And we really need to be able to analyze that and see if we do have relationships that are kind of based around these conversations, even though some of them are very real. We do have to be able to have a mixture, right? Of okay, maybe we discuss this, but when we talk about something that we actually can do something about, or maybe we find a solution of something small that we can make an impact, right? And those are valuable things because I think that when we feel powerless as an individual, that's when that stress comes in, and I think that's a big thing. So the time is important. So how much time do we have to give them? And some of you may say, well, I don't know what to do. I mean, it's a family member, and it's like they get me on the phone for an hour, and I just feel so beaten down by that. I just feel so beaten down, and but I don't know how to get off the phone. Well, think about it. I mean, everything has limits, right? And my theory about life is that you give how much time you want. You give how much time you want, because in the end, nobody's going to give you a Medal of Honor, right? Nobody's going to be like, wow, Ashley stayed on the phone with that relative for 3,572 hours in that lifetime. That's a lot. She needs to get a medal. No. Seriously, think about it. If you have other things that you want to do that is more relaxing, like sitting on the couch and looking at the wall, you need to think about that. Because in the end, what you're intaking in from that person is either going to help you or hurt you, right? So if you have someone that's being negative or taking you down or relishing in things that aren't working for you, and that can be challenging to think about too, because there are folks out there that get that Cheshire grin when something bad's going down in your life. Oh, tell me what's going on. Oh, that's just horrible. Oh, it's just horrible. As you see the sides of their mouth curling up into a smile, it's like, wow. And then they've heard enough from you, and I got to go. So they've gotten enough gossip they need from you so they can go tell everybody else in the family or people you know. So we got to be careful about limiting our time, right? We got to limit our time. The next thing is that we need to be also saying, hey, okay, who do I really like spending time with? And why do I like spending time? Why? Why do I like spending time with certain people? And that's interesting because I think that helps us to understand kind of, okay, why is that? Okay, well, maybe that's more my speed. Maybe that's the type of people I like to be around. Maybe that's the type of person that I feel good around. Maybe they engage with me and I engage with them. Like I think it's great. I have some relationships where I just feel great around. And they feel great around me. They're ignited, they're happy, and it's not a fakery. It's real. And then there's folks that you kind of get around and it's almost like you feel like you don't know what to say next. And it's almost like you feel like, oh God, am I saying the right thing? Or should I say that? Am I going to offend them? And sometimes you just got to go out on a limb and do what you got to do. You'll find out quicker than not. If that was right or wrong. But I think sometimes we have to analyze that and see that for what it is. And then, when we're thinking about family, we need to look at that specifically because if you're dealing with a family member that you've been dealing with for forever, we're going to have to change some of those dynamics, right? You can't just change overnight, right? You could go cold, you could block the person, you could go silent, but that's not the way that we operate here, right? So that's not our operation. We like to be powerful and then powerful in the process of learning and powerful to basically train other people to how we will and how we want to be treated. So when I return, we'll be talking more about that, more tips and tricks on how to deal with that. And, I think we'll go from there and it'll be very helpful. If you have a journal, if you don't have a journal, go out and get one. If you do have a journal, take some notes on some of this stuff so you just kind of remember it, and one of the things that I would advocate is, when you're at work, analyzing who is it that you like to spend time with at work. Because you don't always have to look at the negative. You can look at the positive. Who do I like to spend time with at work? Who do I get along with? Why is that? Why do I get along with those people? And we can rock and roll from there. So stay tuned. Live Your True Life Perspectives with your host, me, Ashley Burgess, will be back in. I'll be back this time in 2 shakes.
Get in here. You're listening to Perspectives with Ashley Burgess.
Welcome back live to Live Your True Life Perspectives, and I'm your host, Ashley Burgess. On today's show, I've been discussing dealing with challenging, negative, and demanding folks and how to deal with them. How do we deal with them? How do we create and safeguard an environment for ourselves? Because I know some of you say, well, I have to interact with this person, or this is a family member, or what have you, and I get that. And, before we've been talking about, the red flags and figuring out, how to be able to analyze and understand who is it that you feel good around, who is it that you don't, the red flags of demanding, challenging person. And right before the break, we were talking about the concept of, how do we safeguard ourselves when dealing with folks that we have to deal with, right? So we talked about the time concept, limiting time. How much time do we really need to spend with them? And this is very important because I know that some of you might have a mother or a father, a family member, somebody in your life that, well, you do have to interact with to some degree. but I think that you might be interacting with them more than necessary. And this is very important, more than necessary, right? And a lot of times we get into the habit because that person wants to talk our ear off. That person wants to tell you all the stuff. I mean, how many of you have someone in your life where you literally pick up the phone, you answer the call, and you're like, hey, what's going on? And they go off for 30 minutes, and you haven't said a word. And they're not even checking to see if you're breathing. Okay, they don't even know. They're not checking on any of that. They're not checking on your pulse at all. That's a sign. And how many of you have been doing this for a long time? How many of you have been allowing this type of relationship to continue year after year? And I know that we don't always want to bring stuff up to start an issue. I'm not saying let's all start a fight today. Hey, listen to Ashley Burgess's podcast. Start a fight with your family and friends. Let's do it right now. No, I'm not initiating total angry conflict. But what I'm saying is that we have to begin to train them what is acceptable and what's not acceptable. And one of the biggest things that I want you to think about, and this is a really great example. This is a really, 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 really great example. Is that when we're on the phone with somebody and they have that tendency, for example, let's say like you answer the phone, hey, how's it going? So-and-so. And they're like, oh my God, this is happening in my life. This is happening in my life. This is horrible. Oh my God, what am I going to do about this? Da-da-da-da. Literally now, instead of waiting all that time, you need to basically interrupt and say, hey, I got a couple of minutes to talk. I hope you're doing well. How are things going? Okay. So we have to interrupt them in those situations. Right? You got to do it. You can't just let them go on like a broken record for the last 15 years. The other thing, too, that I find interesting is that with a lot of these people who are challenging, demanding, even negative, they like to live off of anything that's negative in your life. They like to live off of anything that's painful in your life. So don't give them that. Don't tell them anything that you're going through that's stressful or anxious, creating anxiety in your life. Don't give them that. Why give them that? Don't give them any of that. I mean, because what happens is they'll want to bring up this stuff over and over and over again, right? They'll want to talk about it. They'll want to bring it up. They'll want to discuss it, right? So that's not a great thing. And the more that they want to discuss it, the more they're going to bring you down in that process. And so what I'm saying is don't talk about those types of things with these people. Don't bring it up. Don't discuss it. There's no need to even discuss it. There's no need to have that conversation. There just isn't one. And a lot of times they're going to bait you into discussing that or having that conversation because they've done it so often in the past. But, instead of saying anything, to say, hey, no, I'm doing really good. Bring up something that's positive. Because usually that's going to stop them in their tracks. Bring up something that's positive. And to some degree, you might even have to use some gray rocking techniques here, right? Because a lot of these people, they want to break your boundaries, right? There's a boundary issue. And all these challenging, demanding people are demanding of your time and your energy. And the more and more you give them, the more and more they take, right? And so we have to realize that. We have to see that. And so, a lot of times gray rocking helps. A lot of times also just putting your foot down and not engaging the same way as you have. So, if someone doesn't communicate properly, but they'll send 15 emails out, and you've been reading these 15 emails out, each week at work, and they won't communicate the way you want to, eventually you're going to have to stop communicating the way they want you to and basically train them into a different type of communication. I know that a lot of our time is precious, and the idea, right, of reading 15 emails from someone that can communicate that in one email or one short conversation is very advantageous. And I think that a lot of times, though, we get into other people's ways of communication that we kind of fell into because that's what they wanted from us. They wanted us that way. They wanted it to be that way. And so over time, they kind of beat us down. We kind of went on and acquiesced into that situation when in reality, that just creates more stress and anxiety. We also have I believe some podcasts and definitely some video content on gray rocking. And if you haven't checked out my YouTube channel, you can go to YouTube and we talk about gray rocking, how to gray rock, what gray rocking is on YouTube for sure. Gray rocking is very helpful. And so, gray rocking is a very helpful tool when you're dealing with someone that kind of wants everybody to be upset or wants everybody to be in a negative fashion or thought process. It can be very valuable. Also, it safeguards you from telling them about your personal life, right? Because we don't really want to share things about our personal life with somebody that's demanding or challenging or negative, because they're going to probably bring it up when we don't want it to be brought up. It also fuels them to some degree because we're at their energy level. We're talking about negative things. We're bringing up things. It's kind of what charges them, right? And sometimes we might throw something like that out because they're very receptive to it. But again, that's only bringing us stress and anxiety, because now you're also fueling that person where they believe, oh, okay, well, I can commiserate with Ashley. I can commiserate with Ashley. Ashley's going to commiserate with me. We can have that. And that's something we don't really want to get into, because it also trains them that they can call us and have an issue and problem. We're going to pick up the phone. We're going to commiserate with them. We're going to do that. And if you're not commiserating with them and saying, hey, I got to run, I'm working on XYZ, have a great day. And if they keep on talking, hey, I got to go to work, I'll talk to you later. You got to start cutting these folks off. And you don't really want to tell them why you're doing that at all, because you don't want to tell them. You just want to start doing it. And eventually they're going to learn. And over time, if you stop giving into the negativity, they're going to start realizing that y'all's conversations are very different. They might not like the direction the conversations are going, and that's okay. That's okay, because sometimes in these situations, we need to have less interaction with these people. So we don't want to commiserate with them. We want to be positive, and not toxically positive, but we want to be positive in nature and be able to connect at a certain higher frequency in our life to be able to have that option. So if you're having to deal with people like that, remember, we don't want to be in a powerless state. We want to limit our time. We want to use that gray rocking. We don't want to commiserate, right? And then we also need to say, hey, how much time am I willing to allot this relationship in the grand scheme of things? Because time is one of the most precious things we have, right? And our time and our health. So, if they're causing stress, which is impacting your health, and they're taking away your time, which you can't get back, we really have to analyze the situation, right? We really have to think about this, because this is very valuable stuff in our life, and it's something with a high commodity. The greatest thing, too, is that when we begin to have some emotional distance and limit our time, or even eliminate some of these challenging, negative, and demanding people, it can make our lives better. If you have some ideas for shows that you would like to share with me, don't hesitate to reach out. Just go to ashleyburgess.com, ashleyburges.com. Click on that contact page and send me a message, and I will respond back to you. In the meantime, share this show with anybody that you think needs to hear this message. And by the way, don't forget to live your true life. Live your true life perspectives with me, your host, Ashley Burgess, will be back in. I'll be back this time. You know it. I'll be back this time in 3 shakes.